My latest guest on KarishmaKonnect tells me that each one of us has our own soundtrack to life and it keeps evolving. Such a beautiful thought. I quite agree, don't you? Tell me your most recent soundtrack for yourself in the comments below, because on this Thoughtful Thursdays episode on KarishmaKonnect, I am talking to Bindu Subramaniam, a vocalist, pianist, and songwriter herself, also the co-founder and CEO of SaPa and SaPa in Schools, which is the Subramaniam Academy of Performing Arts in India. She's also the daughter of legendary violinist Dr. L. Subramaniam, and she tells me more about having music in her genes, but also making her own version out of it. Her entrepreneurial journey, coming to terms with it, why is music education so important for all of us, and what budding musicians can keep in mind when navigating so many avenues that we have today to get discovered. Go check out the episode. Until the next one, I'll see you soon only on KarishmaKonnect, right here, right now, every Sunday and Thursday. Keep tuning in. Tata. It's a pleasure to host you, and I look forward to knowing your journey from your own words and from your own experience, because I think that's what defines one's story the best way possible. So thank you, and I look forward to this one.
Thank you so much for having me, Karishma. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Most welcome. To begin with, Bindu, I start off with this question across all my podcasts, and I'll ask you the same. Tell me about how you started. What is special about where you are today, and what can people gauge from it?
Okay. Well, I always say that there's nothing particularly special. I'm a very normal person, and I had a very normal childhood because I believe that all of our circumstances that make us unique are very normal to us.
Yeah.
So I'm a singer, songwriter, music educator, entrepreneur, and basically I think it's my mission to make people love music, right? And to make music a meaningful part of children's lives, particularly. So it's been a bit of a journey for me because although I come from a family of musicians and I've been on stage since I was really young, for the longest time, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And that could be because I was a lawyer for Halloween once. And, this whole idea of carrying around a briefcase full of candy seemed like a thing that was worth doing for the rest of my life. And then I started reading John Grisham books. And then I was like, yeah, corporate law, 100-hour weeks. This is it, man. This is what I need to do. But then halfway through law school, I realized that really wasn't what I was meant to be doing. And there were so many other people who can do it really well. And so being the good girl that I am, I finished my law degree anyways. I did my internships, I registered. And then I was like, okay, now my real life starts. Let me get on with what I want to do. And then my parents, of course, were like, you've done a bachelor's in law. You can't end with a bachelor's in law. So, just do the master's. So I did a master's degree in law. And then at the same time, I was looking at how to make my way in music. So I did a master's in songwriting and music business, and I was just kind of looking at different opportunities around music, which was interesting for me because I spent so much time saying that, okay, I'm from a family of musicians, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily need to be a musician. And music education is something that came to me very organically because I really love working with kids. I love seeing the impact that music has on people. And I call myself a very accidental entrepreneur because I'm not a person with an MBA. I'm not a person who comes, from a family where people are entrepreneurs, or I didn't even at that time have friends who are entrepreneurs. Like, it was just a very random thing. And I feel like it's been quite a journey, but one that I enjoyed.
And I will ask you this question. Was there any similarity between law and music that you noticed?
Well, I'm going to give you the politically correct answer here. There is a politically incorrect one, let me be honest. I think that whatever you study never goes to waste. So, and I have what is sometimes very politely in my circle referred to as degree disease. So I have 8 degrees, and I feel like there are connections between everything, and you have to just find them. So the very obvious thing is when you study law, you understand intellectual property and copyrights and things like contracts and stuff, which is necessary in the creative sphere.
Yes.
But also, I think if you do anything well, it's all about hard work. It's all about dedication. It's all about broadening your horizons. It's all about understanding how the system works. And and learning from it and refining. So I think there's a lot to take away.
And then tell me about music education. Why is it so important to you, especially in today's times? And also, because you have had a connection with the history of music, you've had a family, you come from a family of music. How have you seen this evolve over time?
Right. So I come from a place of tremendous privilege, not in terms of, say, necessarily financial wealth or things like that, but I've been fortunate to have been surrounded by so much music and different cultures from around the world from the time that I was a child. So it was very normal for me to kind of interact with an African griot musician one day and kind of understand a little bit about where he comes from, and then sit with a French harp player or an American jazz musician or a great Carnatic musician or Hindustani musician or a Baul folk musician. And so I think I sort of formed this assumption in my mind that this is normal. Having this sort of global cultural immersion is very normal. And that's a big part of what makes us, humans that can interact with each other and understand each other and not be biased against each other. And then at some point I realized that not everyone has access to this experience. And at some point I realized that, everyone or almost everyone loves music in their own way, and everyone has a story about, oh yeah, I sing, but I sing in the shower, or I listen to music when I'm stressed, or I need music when I'm exercising, and music is what I need when I come home from work after a day, or when I'm pumping myself up into something, I need music. And so music is like, everyone has a soundtrack to their lives, right? How do we kind of harness the power of music in a meaningful way to help children? And there's so much research that shows that it helps children with the skills that we measure, such as literacy and numeracy. If you start to sing in many different languages as a child, then you build, it kind of, the neural pathways help you build that ability to learn the language later in life. You hear the nuance of language and so on. For children, it helps with numeracy, it helps with reading skills, it helps with memorization, team building, and so there are all of those kind of hardcore ways in which music help you. But there's also softer stuff, right? Like, so if you look at the ISO principle, it says that music can help impact your mood. Yeah. And it can help change your mood. And that's something that we instinctively know. But the ISO principle sort of states that if I want to move from sad to happy, I don't start by listening to a happy song. I start by listening to a sad song. And then I slowly change the mood, and my mood changes with it, which I found very interesting. So I think I just sort of started putting these dots together and realizing that we need to create this experience for children in order to help them understand themselves and the world around them better. And music is sort of a tool that supports that transformation, whether it's social emotional learning, whether it's growth mindset, whether it's, self-regulation, whether it's interpersonal skills. So, I mean, I think that music is important in many ways. I don't think it's the only thing in the world that can solve all the world's problems, but it's something that means a lot to me, and I see the impact that it has on children across the board.
And how does that influence today's times? Because today's times are diametrically different from where we are coming from even. So the kind of challenges that, the other day I saw a video where a content creator spoke about having a child who, is dealing with AI friends in the future. That's where we are headed, basically. That's what we're talking about. And that comes with its own kind of problems and situations and advantages even. So how do you think music will then adapt to even that kind of a scenario moving forward?
But I don't see the relevance of music diminishing, but I do see my 2.5-year-old nephew saying, Echo, please play Wheels on the Bus, as opposed to what it was, when my daughter was a child or when I was a child. So the relevance of music and the sort of instinctive ability to relate to music stays the same.
Yeah.
And I see with very small children, it also helps with self-regulation and communication of ideas. So like I had this game that I played with my daughter, and I play it with my nephew now, where he can kind of come up with different ideas and songs and kind of riff on lyrics, which helps him express what he's going through, right? So if it's like, what is the Agni on the bus saying when you're singing the Wheels on the Bus song, or when is there a song for brushing your teeth, or is there a song for going to bed? And so there's this kind of way that children naturally instinctively get into music. And I saw a lot during the pandemic of how children were isolated, right? And there were a lot of mental health issues, a lot of anxiety issues, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear. And at that point, our entire organization, all of us at SaPa sort of realized that we moved our goalposts from saying that we are just helping kids, we're helping create the next generation of musicians, we're working on, getting kids to sing well and perform well, to say that, okay, how can we be that emotional and social support mechanism that they may not even know that they need, right? So in that sense, even at a very young age, it's about how does this song make you feel? What are your emotions? How do you express your emotions through this? Or how can music help you form communities, right? A lot of teenagers tend to bond over music, right? So how do we use that to talk about what we're going through, talk about what we're feeling? I mentor a fabulous young group of songwriters who are, tweens and teens. And so for them, music has been a lot of therapy, a lot of connecting with each other. That's a common ground through which you can communicate. And I mean, AI is definitely out there. It's something that we shouldn't be scared of. I don't think it's going to destroy creative industries. In fact, I think it's going to enhance it in many, many ways. So our social interactions change, but I think having music and other tools help us stay grounded. I mean, there's research now that shows that children who have devices early, some of the emotional disconnect happens because they don't make eye contact, or that adults around them who are on devices are not making eye contact. And there's so much that they lose because children from a very young age learn emotions and emotional signals by mimicking, by seeing. So if you're looking down at a screen, or the adult is looking down at the screen, then you're losing that kind of active response mechanism that's happening on faces. So there is a lot of scary stuff out there. But if you are, say, for example, even for 30 minutes in a group, in a circle, singing a song, then you're creating positive experiences for the child and for the adult as well. So I think there is always space for music to make positive inroads.
And then in between all of this, what does music mean to you? Why did you particularly, you might be a third generation musician, you might have had a family of musicians, but there's still something that would have caught on to you specifically. What was that all about?
Absolutely. I think music is it's my most authentic voice, right? And I say this often, I'm a work in progress, but music has always been a very constant source of helping me relate to myself and the world around me.
After having, pursued education and even giving an educative platform to several other people, what do you think? Why is it important? And why do you think it is still relevant?
I think the most important skill that we need to learn is the ability to learn and the ability to love to learn, right? And how to kind of not be set in your ways. It goes back to this whole idea of growth mindset and the fact that we're constantly evolving. So at one end of the spectrum, you have kids who are so concerned about, am I making the right decision? Is this, once I'm in my 11th grade, everything is focused on what I'm going to do after 12th. How do I get into this thing? Because this is the biggest thing in my life, and everything after that will be influenced by it. No, your first degree really doesn't matter as much as you think that it does. And in our generation and the generations that come after it, so many of us are evolving, changing career paths, finding new opportunities, doing multiple things. That whole generation of, I finish, my BCom or whatever, and then I join Titan and I work there for 40 years and I retire and get a gold watch, that's gone, right? I mean, that doesn't exist. So we need to be able to keep evolving. And so as we evolve, we need to be able to learn new things. And formal education is very beneficial because it gives you structures to help you continue to learn. And as you learn that structure itself, then you can go forward and do many other things which are not necessarily what you've learned in your university education. And we still do live in a society where there is a value for the degree and the discipline. And there are always outliers, right? Who can goodwill hunting and learn in a library and everything. But most of us need some sort of external support to be able to learn, and to be able to learn in a consistent way, and to put in the kind of effort that is needed to have to have some level of expertise in anything. So I think degrees are still relevant, and I think that they are important. And it can sometimes be a cop out to say that, oh, I don't need to do this, I can do it on my own. But these structures exist because they have served us, but they're not the only thing in life that are important.
You've managed to blend entrepreneurship and business with something creative as music. What do you have from that journey that you've learned, and how did you manage to do that successfully with SaPa? Tell me about SaPa as well.
So, like I said, I'm a very accidental entrepreneur. I wanted to teach music to a few kids, and I thought, what was it that I was missing with my own childhood music learning experience? And I realized that classical music has always been great. There's never been an issue with classical music, but what hasn't necessarily adapted the way that it should is the methodology for classical music or Indian classical music. So how do I make it more accessible to babies? So I created the SaPa baby textbook, which was, kind of filled with cartoons and fun facts and notes to parents and like all color, to kind of like, how do I get 3-year-old kids to be excited about Indian classical music? So it started there. And I wasn't thinking about entrepreneurship or anything. I was just like, okay, it would be fun to make a book, right? Like, who doesn't want to write a book? Let's write a book. And then I realized that it's not that easy to, and I printed 500 copies, took a loan from my dad when we had like 3 students. And then I was like, okay, now I need to pay this loan back. What's the next step? Okay, can I sell this book in stores? Can I do something like Scholastic? So I would go from like store to store at that point, trying to get contacts, or, the interweb was starting to take off. So can I sell these books online? And, can I talk to online distributors and, these baby portals and stuff like that? And then I realized that it was hard. And that was also a time where, most of our music stores were sort of converting into toy stores, and bookstores were becoming smaller. And so it may not have been the best time market-wise, but I had this conviction that, every time I put this book in the hands of a child, the child's face lights up. They hold on to it, they hug it, they want to take it home with them. So there's something there. So I can't give up. And so over a period of time, that evolved into different things, the SaPa Baby program at our academies, our physical locations. And then the SaPa in Schools program started, which is really now kind of our flagship way of making high quality music education a part of every child's life, irrespective of, background, circumstance, geographic location. So we work with some of the best private schools in the country. We also work with government schools, and we work in different languages. And so over a period of time, SaPa has evolved from a couple of crazy people who were really passionate about taking music everywhere to an organization that's actually making a difference. And our first lot of kids who came into us as babies are now out on the world stage performing. They're being featured in Rolling Stone magazine. They're performing at, Tirupati, and they're everything in between. So it's been a journey. And in terms of entrepreneurship, I don't think I accepted that I was an entrepreneur until I was like 6 or 7 years in, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I need to figure this out. And then a great part of it for me was joining the Stanford Seed Transformation Program, where I, for the first time, got to be in a room with other entrepreneurs and other, business founders and leaders and decision makers who were not as different from me as I imagined that they'd be. And so many of us were going through similar issues at different scales. And that's really, that network has been very powerful and very supportive.
Why did you face that struggle at that time?
Oh, I have always struggled with imposter syndrome, and I think I still do, right? Like, what if somebody realizes that I actually don't know how to run this business, that I have I have no idea what I'm doing. So I think that's real, and I am happy to acknowledge it now. But I think that's where it came from. Like, if someone's talking about Philip Kotler for the first 5 years, I'm like, I don't know who that is. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. What is a balance sheet supposed to look like? But and everything that you're doing is pure heart, right? And you're experimenting and you're forest dumping your way through it. And later, when you look at maybe the theory, you'll realize where you made mistakes and you'll realize where you instinctively were on point and all of that. But it is a journey to realize that, okay, maybe I do belong here. Maybe this is fine.
I mean, I'm seeing a bunch of musicians, and especially with social media coming up as a platform, there's so much of access today to people. I'm seeing Instagram creators sing their own music and put it up online, get the hits, get the music goes viral. At a time like that, what do you think is important for every music lover or every person that pursues music to keep in mind and stay connected to the reality of the art itself?
So I think art is always evolving, right? And there is no point in saying that, okay, this is not right, this is not authentic, it's dilute, this is the reality of the world that we're in, right? And this is the playground that we have, and this is the medium through which we can express ourselves to our audiences. So earlier, people used to say that the record labels were the gatekeepers, and you wouldn't have access to audiences, or audiences wouldn't have access to you. And now the issue is not access, because everyone is out there and anyone can find you, but the issue is discoverability, right? Because if you've got a million artists who are out there, we're still listening to the same 4 or 5 artists largely, right, that are being made discoverable in the right way. And maybe it's not the record label that's making these decisions, maybe it's algorithms that's making these decisions, and there are still people behind these algorithms that are kind of working to decide, oh, this looks really cool, let's promote this. So it's really important to remember that you can get out there, but it's not always necessarily 100% democratic process and all of that. There are still factors at play, right? And I think that it's really important for young people, especially, to realize that you can't measure your self-worth by what's happening on social media. And you need to realize that you have a public persona, which you put forth, which can be authentic, which can be all of those things, but you can't measure yourself based on that. And you need to keep some part of yourself for yourself. So it's always, especially with very young kids or teenagers and people who are impressionable, something that is a cause for concern for me, because I support them and I want them to have their music out there. I want them to be creating the content that they need to create and want them to do that. But I also want them to realize that their sense of self-worth is separate and still very important. And in terms of skills that they have to build, it's not enough to just be able to sing well or write well. You also need to understand how social media works. You also need to understand the distribution aspect of it. You also need to understand how to collaborate with other people. You need to be presentable. And so these are skills that you need to build. Every artist, of the coming generation needs to understand how to record themselves a little bit. They need to understand how basic music production works. So the skills are expanding. I don't agree when people say that, oh, it's so easy now. You don't have to be able to sing well. You don't have to be able to do this well. You don't have to do. It's a different set of skills, and you need to be good at a number of things to be successful. Yeah. So it's not easier, it's not lighter. It is still a lot of hard work, like it's always been, but you just need to understand what the framework is.
Very true. I remember I interviewed a budding musician a while ago, and he said the same thing. He said, you end up thinking it's music and it's just singing, but there's so much science and so much everything else attached to it that goes beyond just the act of singing and putting your voice to it, I think. So I definitely agree. And then tell me, what makes, amongst all the types and different forms, which I am sure are equally, valid and relevant, but what do you think makes Indian classical music still a cut above the rest, or what's special about that?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a cut above the rest, and I don't mean to be controversial here, but I think that all forms of music are beautiful. Like at SaPa, I started with the point of Indian classical music because I felt that, when we have children, we like to kind of associate them with tradition, and then they go out and they blossom. From there, I mean, we also teach contemporary music, we teach Western music, we teach global music. In my own journey as an artist, very little of what I've done has been classical, right? I think that we should protect, preserve, promote classical music. But I don't think it's the be all and end all. And I think that classical music is also something that needs to evolve, and it is evolving, and we need to accept and embrace the new forms of music that come out there. So in my own personal voice, I consider myself more a singer-songwriter. I'm more comfortable in English, and I like to draw from different styles of music that I've learned and experienced. So I don't think there's any style of music that's necessarily the one, but I think that every child should have exposure to traditional art and culture just to be grounded in where we're from, and then have exposure to, contemporary and all other types of music.
I know you come from a family of music, and I don't mean to say this question out of the perspective of, privilege. But what I genuinely would like to uncover is, what are, to the people who don't have access to brilliance, what have you kind of inherited, or what is that one learning that you can share that you have got from your parents as brilliant musicians as they are, for aspiring musicians?
The one thing that I've learned from my dad, and that's, I think, the thing that I carry forward most, is the value of hard work and consistency, and just, you have to put in that effort. There is no shortcut to that, right? And also, I see so much about how people say that, okay, it's in your blood, it's genetic, and I'm not discounting the fact that talent exists. It does, right? But so much of it is about the efforts that you put in and the exposure that you have. Yeah. So when we talk about people from musicians' families, or people from sports families, or people from whatever, being inherently naturally better, I think a lot of it needs to be attributed to the fact that they get exposure and they get the right atmosphere early on. So if you look at, say, the child of a tennis player, they will see what tennis looks like at a very high level from a very young age. Yeah. They will have access to the nutrition that they need. They will have access to the food that they, to the exercise regimens that they need. They'll have access to the trainers that they need. So yes, there may be talent, and there are some genetic factors at play, but I think it's really important to realize that early exposure and the right kind of exposure counts for so much. And at SaPa, that's really what we believe, that there is no difference. If you give high quality music education to all kids, then it doesn't really matter what background they're from.
On that note, thank you so much, Bindu. It's definitely been a conversation about so many different things, which I think would surely be resourceful. And definitely, I think for, whether it's the younger parents, whether it's people, whether it's a